Joining us now, Dan Epstein, current Executive Director of A Cause for Action. Dan, we thank you for joining us, and as Executive Director of Cause for Action, give us the bottom line on what's going on here with the White House and the emails and current law. I believe your organization just released a report on this.
Yeah, hey, thanks so much for having me. My organization, which is a government accountability group, has released an analysis that shows that the fact that Lois Lerner lost these emails while on notice back in June 3rd, 2011, from Congressman Dave Camp, that he was doing an investigation, that combined with recent findings that she had in fact instructed people to avoid using email because of congressional oversight. We think this is all circumstantial evidence that Lois Lerner obstructed the congressional investigation, which is a federal crime. That's obstruction of Congress, and we believe that she needs to be held accountable for that.
Well, to have her held accountable, given the current makeup of the Justice Department, Dan, and I realize your organization is nonpartisan in this regard, but given the past performance of the DOJ, do you expect this Attorney General to actually follow up with an aggressive investigation?
Yeah, of course not. I think it's very clear, especially the criminal division of this Justice Department, that they very much are politically sensitive. And the fact that Holder has decided to already have the FBI investigate certain IRS employees through its civil rights division and not the criminal division is indicative that there's not going to be any serious kind of criminal investigations here, or at least in terms of fraud or other types of obstruction statutes. I think what is clear, though, is that Congress very much has the ability to use obstruction as a signal that this administration is very much not about transparency. When you obstruct a congressional investigation, that's a serious issue. And even if we can't rely on our Justice Department, which is a sad state of affairs, to bring justice to those in federal employees who are above the law, we can rely on our Congress to really message that and to really educate the American people that this is a serious problem, and ultimately we need to hold this administration and the ideology of this administration accountable for that.
And Dan, as you're mentioning that on the screen, some pictures of my old colleague on the Ways and Means Committee, Dave Camp, the chairman of that committee, who in his oversight role got the ball rolling, and it really led to so many of these revelations. Yesterday in federal court, a judge tells the IRS, indeed orders the IRS to testify under oath about these lost emails, with the court stepping in at the federal district level. Does this carry, it almost sounds incredible to have to say this, but does the court action, is it more compelling than what you're talking about in Congress, even given the serious nature of misleading Congress that you just outlined?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. Obviously, on a most practical level, if in fact, and the IRS actually has to respond with its testimony within the next 30 days, if in fact there's indications of circumstantial evidence of an attempt to avoid congressional oversight, well, again, that just raises the question, what is the Justice Department going to do now? I think what we've already seen is, if you look at the National Organization for Marriage fight with the Internal Revenue Service, there were findings in testimony before the Eastern District of Virginia that, in fact, the IRS may have violated certain criminal laws. But again, the Justice Department didn't intervene in that case to do an investigation. So we, again, get to that point where DOJ basically signs a blank check on this wrongdoing, and that's a serious issue. I think at least with the IRS providing testimony, we are going to get a sense of, did they follow records management policies? And I think that's another issue that members of Congress can really have a laser focus on, which is to say, well, if they didn't follow records management policies, why was that? And I think one of the things that Cause of Action does is in its memo, it shows the White House actually didn't really want agencies to follow their records retention requirements. In fact, the White House authorized the archives, which archives all of the records in the federal government, and its Office of Management and Budget, which is the policy think tank of the White House, to tell all of the agencies, get rid of your paper records, just keep electronic records. And that mandate, that dictum, is in very many ways inconsistent with the Federal Records Act that Congress requires agencies to follow. And I don't think it's any surprise, given Boehner's forthcoming lawsuit, that this administration is very much about violating legislation, violating the will of Congress in order to advance its own agenda. And we see that here.
A couple of minutes remain, Dan. Again, the name of your organization, Cause of Action. Now, the House has been following procedure in terms of oversight, but there are some who say the House has been perhaps too reticent, waiting too long to take matters into its own hand. Maybe you can clear this up for me, because even as a former member of Congress, it's a little unclear to me. Technically, Lois Lerner, if she has been thought to be lying to the Congress, physically she could face time in a cell that is there within the Capitol, correct? If the Congress wanted to take action, correct?
Yeah, that's true, right? Congress, and in fact, this was actually an issue during the whole Benghazi and Fast and Furious issues with the Justice Department. You can actually put Lois Lerner in the Capitol jail. There's no question. Statutorily, you can do that. You can hold her in contempt and put her in jail. What is that going to do in terms of getting information about the IRS scandal? Probably not a lot, but it is a sign that, hey, we don't let federal employees avoid the law that applies to all other Americans in this country. That all being said, I think Congress is doing exactly what it should be doing in terms of its oversight, which is it's trying to get facts. And part of the problem is that the IRS is slow-rolling Congress. Why is it that we don't find until the last 10 days these emails where Lois Lerner is telling people to avoid using email, to use a Microsoft Office communications server to go and instant message each other? That should have been produced months ago. We should have known about the destruction of records years ago. But the problem is that the IRS is slow-rolling this. And my position on this, and I think Cause of Action's position on this, has been that this is probably a rather clear indication that the White House is consulting the IRS on how to respond to Congress.
Wow, and the implications of that are breathtaking. Dan Epstein, Executive Director, Cause for Action, we thank you for your time. We look forward to our next visit with you. So,
Thanks
you just
so much.
heard from Dan. Your take on this, invited and encouraged. Tweet us your comments at Newsmax TV.